blog from this meeting. The use of any such images or sound recordings is not under the Council's control. So a very warm welcome to our members, our officers, and also guests this evening. Firstly, a warm welcome to all of our councillors, Councillor Sim, Councillor Beardsall, Councillor Adair, Councillor Wheeler, Councillor Shaw, and Councillor Stockwood. Also to my left is the Vice Chair, Councillor Gowland. So welcome to all for attending this evening's meeting. We also have to my right Sarah Whitaker, who's our Service Manager, Finance. And we also have Charlotte joining us this evening from our Internal Auditors BDO. Thank you, Charlotte, for joining us, and you'll be covering item number 4 for us on today's agenda. So I'd like to move on to the first item on the agenda, which is apologies for absence.
We have apologies from Councillor Howard and Councillor Maureen Stockwood, and substituting today we have Councillor Gordon Wheeler.
Thank you very much. Second item on the agenda is, do we have any declarations of interest from members of the group? I'll take that as a no, in which case item number 3 is the minutes of the meeting, which actually was not that long ago, about 2.5–3 weeks ago, held on 1st of November, in fact. Do we have any amendments, observations, or corrections to be made to the minutes? No, in which case I will sign those in due course for this evening. So we'll move on to our substantive items, and we do have a slightly shortened agenda. As I mentioned, we had quite a intensive agenda, that is, meeting on the 1st of November, and that was a delayed one due to the passing of Queen Elizabeth. But we do have this meeting this evening because it was one of the scheduled ones, although it is only 2–3 weeks after the last one, and hence we have a slightly shortened agenda. So item number 4, I will ask Charlotte to please highlight any significant points to take us through the internal audit report, which is on pages 9 to 32 of our pack. So Charlotte, over to you.
Thank you. Hello. So our progress report this evening presents the 2 further audits we've concluded since we last met, which are IT asset management and health and wellbeing. I'll go through those in a second. We also follow up in the report on recommendations raised in previous audits. So we do this every 6 months. We follow up on all medium and high recommendations that have been raised. And we're happy to say that the Council is making excellent progress in implementing all of these. Nearly all of the 21–22 recommendations have been completed. There's only 2 that are overdue, but they're due to be completed in January, relating to planning and section 106. Obviously, the sad events last year kind of contributed to the delay in those. And there's only been 3 recommendations raised of a high or medium level that have fallen due this period from 22–23, and of those, they're all in progress. One of them is subdivided, and one is complete, and one is in progress. So generally, really, really good progress, and we're happy with it all. So moving on to the 2, well, unless there's any questions on follow-up. Okay, so moving on to the 2 reviews. So IT asset management, we gave an opinion of moderate assurance on the design of controls and substantial on the effectiveness. The review looked at the Council's physical IT assets and software licensing arrangements, and involved assessing the controls in place for the provision, use and disposal of assets, and managing the life cycle of hardware, etc. Again, lots of good practice was raised, which you can see in the summary report. We did raise 1 medium finding and 3 low findings, and the medium finding was around policies and procedures. There is currently no procedure or document in place sort of detailing the IT asset management process. But however, there are lots of associated policies like the IT hardware policy and the encryption policy. which kind of partly cover it, but we just think it should be in one place from end to end, the process in one document. And equally, the other associated policies hadn't been reviewed when they were due to be reviewed in March. So we raised a medium finding on that, which management have agreed with. And there are 3 other low findings which you can read about in the report. So are there any questions on that review? Yeah, so that review point was more about the proactive processes. So there is a system in place where the council gets alerted if they need to have more licenses or that some aren't being used, etc. But we just think we should have a more proactive approach, managing, for example, if people leave, what happens to those licenses? Are we paying for something that we don't use? So there's no major gap, but we just think it could be slightly improved. Well, yeah. No, exactly, yeah.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Adair. I mean, it is one I was going to raise, but thank you for clarifying that, Charlotte. Any other points from members on the IT asset management report? I do have a couple of points myself, Charlotte, if I may. I think in terms of the recent pandemic, remote working has obviously increased significantly, and it increases our exposure in terms of our IT infrastructure and so on. So it's pleasing to note that you've highlighted this, but from an officer's perspective, Sarah, I don't know if you're able to answer this, but I am somewhat surprised we have clear roles and responsibilities identified. I think you noted that, but in terms of the actual IT management procedures and documentation, that certainly seems to be lacking at the moment. I'm just curious as to know how that may have arose.
We do, as Charlotte mentioned, we do actually have policies in place, and even the referral to the one that's out of date is actually marginally only out of date. It was last reviewed in March 21, so it was due for review in March. So it's only a few months out of date, and all of our other processes and policies that feed into those do work well, and there's management processes in place for all of those. It's just the combination of having that document in one place that I think Charlotte's referring to that would we agree would probably be beneficial to that process.
And just to follow up, Sarah, the asset refresh strategy, again, that I think you've highlighted, Charlotte, in the review was also quite weak, I believe.
Yeah, again, it was more around the formal documentation of it, because there is a process in place linked to the IT asset register where it monitors the life cycle and when things are coming up, and what the most cost-effective way of managing it is. But it's just processing whose job it is to look at that and how it should work in terms of timelines, etc. That we just think it should be formally documented in a policy procedure document.
Yes, and I asked that question because obviously I think you used the words there, the life cycle, in terms of I don't know where we are as an organisation in terms of replacement of equipment or how our equipment is at the moment. So clearly another very important area I think we do need to ensure we're on top of moving forwards. Any other points on the IT asset management strategy from members? Councillor Gowan.
This may be a misunderstanding of the process, but what you're looking at here is whether the policies exist. Do you also check whether the policies are adhered to? I'd like to say I'm not suggesting they don't adhere to policies, but I'm fully aware it's easy to have policies, it's another matter to keep to them. So is that part of your role?
Yes, during the testing, took a sample of new assets and how they were registered on the IT asset register and followed through the process. So yeah, we do look at it in practice, and that's why we were able to conclude substantial on the effectiveness, even though technically the design of controls we would like to see in sort of more formalised.
Excellent. Thank you for those questions from members. So Charlotte, do you want to continue on to the second report, the health and wellbeing?
Yeah, so the health and wellbeing report, we gave a moderate assurance on the design and effectiveness of controls on this one. The review involved looking at the people strategy, looking at the governance and initiatives around health and wellbeing at the council, communications with staff, use of the employee assistance programme, staff survey results, things like that. Again, lots of good practice was in place, which you can read about. We raised 3 medium findings and 3 low findings. The first was around there not being a specific health and wellbeing strategy. There is a health and wellbeing plan within the people strategy, but it's just a bit brief and doesn't have all the detail that we might expect around kind of the vision and objectives and how you're going to monitor that. And also the role of the workplace health champions and how they interact with everyone. So we felt that if there was a changeover in staff, then a lot of the current informal practices that happen might get lost if it's not formally documented. So we raised it as a medium finding. Management, obviously, as you can see in the report, they agreed with the content of the finding, but not the opinion level. They thought it should be a low. The reason that we sort of pushed back on that was obviously health and wellbeing is really important in terms of recruitment and retention, and that's a big issue in the public sector at the moment. So we think it's key to trying to keep people engaged in work. And also we do see it in other authorities. So that's why we kind of stuck to our guns on the medium. The second recommendation was around KPIs. So the council monitors sickness absence, which is a really important KPI, but it's not, in our opinion, the only thing that we should be looking at, because obviously people might still come into work even if, you know, they're stressed or, you know, have any other issues. They might feel they can't take the time off. So it's kind of identifying other ways of managing health and wellbeing. And we've raised the recommendation that a sort of suite of KPIs covering things like, the number of people accessing the employee assistance programme and external counselling services, sort of going into a deep dive of the causes of sickness absence as well, participation rates in the staff survey, checking the engagement with staff, etc. And again, management accept the content of the finding, but again thought it should be low. But as I sort of explained, we think you can't just measure on sickness absence alone, so that's why we kept it as a medium. And then the third was around the fact that the workplace health intranet page hadn't been updated, so the contact details for the health champions wasn't up to date, and there could have been more information and better communication to promote some of the initiatives that were going on within the council, and management agreed with that finding. And then 3 other low findings were also raised, but you can see those in the report.
Thank you, Charlotte. I must admit, I found this one quite an interesting one. I'll perhaps come back on 1 or 2 points, but I'll open the floor up, I think, to our group to see if we have any comments on what you presented. Councillor Adair.
Well, yes, yeah. Well, I think they're partially in place. It's not formally recorded and monitored regularly. That's the. You talk about the KPIs. Sorry, the suite of KPIs. Yeah. That is monitored. Sickness absence is, but it's just the detail, the level of detail about what type of sickness absence and how long. You know, we think that could be more discussed in the performance clinics and at the moment. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Adair. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. Lastly, following what Reggie just said, thank you. On page 23, You're right. You say sickness absence rates have breakdown the course to have a link to staff who are absent. That's really quite worrying because we need to be very clear what the sickness types absences were, particularly with mental health issues.
Yeah.
Because too often managers can duck that question because it's hard to sometimes talk about it, and we need to talk about it, and that's why it's so important to drill down further into that, so it's completely understandable what it is, what the issues are, what's been done about it, and it's highlighted because it can't be buried away. I'm not saying it is, but reading your report and so on, seen it for the first time tonight, it does suggest that we don't have the level of detail which I think you're alluding to.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think one thing I can say though, I don't know if you noticed it, but the CEO is a mental health first aider, which is, shows a really good tone from the top in terms of how the council approaches mental health. And council did sign up to the Time to Change mental health pledge as well. So it did enact some good processes around that. But I think, clearly defining it within a strategy and understanding how you're going to manage that and monitor it throughout the council is important too.
One of the things I've come across before, one of the things I've come across before is when sickness absences are reported, too often, is there an other column here? If so, how is that populated? Because I think we should be moving towards removing an other column. If there is another column, I don't know if there is, because it's an easy way to duck out of actually trying to identify a problem, just say, tick another box. Because we need to understand why the person's not well.
Yeah.
And need to talk about it.
Yeah.
Rather than, I'm not suggesting we're burying it. It could be seen that's what we're trying to do. We shouldn't be seen to be trying to do that at all.
So,
I just wanted to clarify that whilst we don't have a KPI that specifically measures the type of sickness, that information is obtained. We have back to work interviews with each of the employees when they've been off sick. That information is monitored, recorded and sent back to HR. And if a concern is raised by line management, that would obviously be followed up with the senior HR team. And also that we do have the employee assistance programme that employees can be directed to for issues such as mental health. And we do have a counselling service that those employees can be directed to if needed.
Where I was coming from is to make certain that no one's afraid to identify that as the cause of sickness, illness, and it's spoken about rather than as has happened. We all know that in years not too far, long past, and it's tend to be hidden away. No one talks about it. We have to talk about it.
Thinking because of the spread or the diverse nature of the employees that the council has, you might have you've got some in this building and maybe it's easy to monitor, but there's other employees in many other areas and they're all doing different tasks and they're exposed to different well-beings, if you want to put it like that. And it's just that they're all, the same philosophy and the same policy should be attached to all of them. And I think that's what would be a bit of a worry, that, you might, as you get the people who are in this building and be able to monitor them, but are you monitoring the ones who are out, refuse and all the rest of it, and are they getting the same treatment or being looked after in the same way? That's my.
I think Sarah, you wanted to come back on council.
I just wanted to come back on the fact that mental health, like you say, it has historically been a subject people don't like to talk about, but we do promote that in the council quite frequently. So we have sort of mental health discussion days. We have coffee and cake in the kitchen where
I saw that.
So we do really promote that, and we encourage people to talk about that with each other or with specifically trained people within the council that they can go to confidentially.
Sorry, I wanted to follow up on your point really. It's a question really. I don't know, how deep is the management structure here? How many levels of line managers would there be between the CEO and somebody on the waste collection bin? Approximately. Sorry.
I think Charlotte's is still on actually.
Yeah. There's probably about 2 to 3 levels depending on where you are. There tends to be a sort of direct line manager, particularly for refuse drivers. They will have a direct line manager that sort of speaks to that person on a daily basis, but they have access to the lead specialist and the service manager if needed as well. They were quite hands-on, particularly down at the depot with the refuse collection team, I know that they do go down there quite regularly and have sort of morning meetings before the shift begins.
Any other points from members of the group? I don't see any hands up. Charlotte, I mean, this particular one, I think clearly that there was a little bit of pushback from management. I think recognising that it is a very crucial and critical area, and the members' questions here have demonstrated that. I think in terms of, I suppose, management, Sarah, the statistics are pretty positive in terms of what we currently have. Notwithstanding the recommendation about further KPIs, but I think this particular review, particularly in the light of COVID and home working and so on, it's very timely, and I'm pleased to note that you have raised some of these concerns. I know management have their perspectives on it, but I believe in January 20th, Sarah, we also signed up to the Time to Change pledge as an employer, and in terms of the worker health champions we have and so on, I think we're moving in the right direction. But I'm surprised the intranet, I mean, that I would have seen as a fairly quick win in terms of making sure that is maintained and updated, and I would strongly urge us to make sure we're at least keeping on top of those areas that we can fairly swiftly. But overall, I think, from the discussion we've had this evening, I think the points you've highlighted in the report, Charlotte, are resonating with many of the members, and I think officers do recognise some of the the weaknesses and where improvements can be made. And I think I'll go back to one of the quotes in the report, which was there is scope for improvement always. So I think that has been acknowledged by ourselves. So thank you for highlighting those points. Any further or final points on the health and wellbeing report? No. In which case, I think in terms of this particular item, it's good to see internal audit is on track. I think we're still progressing nicely, and I believe we're planning the safeguarding and main financial systems in terms of the next report. But thank you for highlighting those points. And we as a group are asked, and the recommendation is that we note the progress of the report, which we've duly done. We've had some discussion around the main two reports. So thank you very much for that. Charlotte, you are welcome to stay and continue to listen to the rest of the meeting. But if you do want to leave, please feel free to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, in which case we are on to agenda item number 5, which is the capital and investment strategy. Now, we did have quite a comprehensive report at our last meeting, and I've had a discussion with officers in between in terms of progress, but Sarah, progress in between. But Sarah will take us through the key points of this. And just to remind ourselves, the CIPFA recommendations for this particular report have changed, so they are now quarterly, and this, I believe, is the midterm one, Sarah. So over to you to highlight some of the key points for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. As you quite rightly say, this is the second report of this year, having just 2 weeks ago done the first quarter. So I'll just direct you to the main points, which are at 3.2 just refers back to the knowledge and skills framework questionnaire that was distributed for return at the beginning of November, and I think Councillor Verdi, you're going to come back onto that after this report, so I'll just leave that there for now. Paragraphs 4.1 to 4.4 refer to the economic uncertainty that we're and the environment that we're in at the moment. We've got rising inflation at 10.1% and forecast to peak at 12% within the next few months. Interest rates are currently at 3% and forecast to peak at 5.25% by March 23. Paragraph 4.4 summarises the investment income as at Q1 was 673k. It's now 1.3 million, which is reflecting increases in interest rates. Paragraph 4.6 shows the council's investment activities and an average interest rate of 2.16, which has increased from 1.51 at Q1. So again, reflective of those higher rates that we're getting in general across our investments. The previous year was only at 1.16. The rate does depend upon when the investment was made. So obviously investments made earlier in the year when investment rates were lower, brings the average down a little bit, but rates at the moment are generally higher and keeping in line with base rates. There is a greater spread of duration of council's investments compared with this time last year, when there was a need to hold more cash for liquidity purposes. So now we're sort of looking to invest more in 3 to 6 months. Paragraph 4.8 details the Section 106 balance, which has increased to 40.8 million as of the time of writing. It was budgeted at 0.5%, and that gave a budget of around 90k, but due to the increase, not just the increase in interest rates, but also the value of Section 106s that we're holding, the projection for that is now 598,000. Paragraph 4.9 shows a graph with a spread on the length of our investments. So this refers back to before, the majority of which are held in short-term cash or have been historically. But the rates are rising, so at this stage it's prudent to invest on shorter term so that you can take advantage of those rates as they rise in the near future. We are showing good average council rates compared to SONIA. We are lower as the money market funds because they do lag slightly behind the SONIA, the Bank of England base rates. Medium will depend on when the investment was made, as I mentioned earlier, but our longer term investments, as they always have, are still outperforming. We're getting a decent rate on our long term investments. Paragraph 4.11, the capital value of the diversified funds, which is something that we talked about at the last meeting, was at 1.429 as of when this report was written. A deficit on the capital value. It's come down ever so slightly to 1.3, 1.3.5 as of the most recent report we've had, which was a couple of days ago. There's currently a statutory override, which you'll be aware of, which is preventing that loss impacting on the general fund due to end March 23. But as a mitigation process for this, we've earmarked 200,000 out of the 21-22 underspends the efficiency savings last year, but also we are recommending to put a further 660,000 out of this year's efficiencies to mitigate against potential losses should that statutory override not be extended past March. Paragraph 4.13 refers to the borrowing and associated indicators. We don't externally borrow at the moment, so these indicators at the moment are not as relevant as some of the others. Our internal need to borrow has increased ever so slightly, just to point that out, but that's due to a delay in a capital receipt at Holygate Lane. But if you refer to the liability benchmark, which is our true need to borrow, and this is another addition from the changes to the Prudential Code. So this is a new indicator. We're sitting at 41 million, so quite clearly from that, we don't need to borrow at this point. Paragraph 4.18 shows potential indicators. There is no change at this stage from Q1. The capital underspend is projected to be around 6 million, primarily from support for registered housing providers, Bingham Hub, and profiling of land expenditure on operational land and buildings. The financing costs and net revenue stream shows an improved position, but that's due to higher investment returns and no debt charges because we're not externally borrowed. And the expected investment position is higher due to the rephasing of the capital programme and the additional Section 106 monies. The CFR is also higher due to the Holygate Lane delay, but this will correct itself in 23-24 when that receipt comes in and is applied to the internal borrowing. Paragraph 4.19 refers to our commercial investments. As we've said at previous meetings, we've set ourselves a target of 30%. Our current position has reduced from, I think Q1 was about 19%, we're down at 16.3 now. That is mostly due to the delay in Bingham Hub and the receipts that we were due on the officers on those premises. Paragraph 4.21 to 25, the charts show the spread of investments across sector and across asset type, and also talks about the training required for officers, which is on the 17th of January. I'm sure that's already in your diaries. So on conclusion, the economy is still fraught with difficulty as interest rates are rising and there's a real risk of recession. Obviously, the rise in interest rates does have a positive effect on our income returns, but also that has a negative effect on the capital values of our longer term investments. We do hold them long term and we do expect them to rise. Our Treasury advisors are currently not advising us to withdraw from those investments. They do expect them to go back. So as of this point, we are keeping our investments in there. Changes to the accounting code will, going forward, restrict what we can do, and also the threat borrowing caps, but we will continue to report back on any changes.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah. And I think you probably now know what the Governor of the Bank of England feels like when he's giving one of his reports. But thank you for that insight. Do we have any points of discussion, Councillor Gowland, on Sarah's report?
Can I ask about the SIL money? So it seems there's quite a big investment in SIL money, or saving. What would you say? You've got it a lot in the bank. Is that the right word? And also the interest rates on it seems, I mean, maybe not that high, given that it's basically money that's going to be spent on services for the community. Can I ask how that's changed in the last year, the amounts that's actually saved, stored, whatever the correct word is, and when it's expected to be spent? Or I can understand maybe spending on infrastructure is not a great idea at the moment. And I have another question, but maybe I'll bring that next. Thanks.
I don't have the figures to hand on what balances we've got from SIL. It's all dependent upon when applications come in. So I don't have those, but I can get those, but they will change on a regular basis. In terms of the plan to invest them, that will all depend upon requests and proposals put in. And I think we had a meeting on SIL a couple of weeks ago, and that's going to be something that we will put out to councillors and to groups to, bid for that money. But I think that will all depend on the process going through to allocate the funds to each project as it comes in.
Sorry, so section 4.8, SIL, is that not direct SIL?
That's section 106, I think you're referring to, Councillor Garland, but Sarah.
Yeah, 106 and SIL.
It's a combination of both. So we hold section 106 and SIL in ring-fenced accounts because
lots of money.
It is lots, yeah. Majority of that will be section 106 money.
And so is there, I mean, what I'm trying to ask is, why aren't we spending on that on schools? Is what I'm fundamentally asking. Why is it sitting in the bank?
It's all down to individual agreements on section 106, as it can only be spent on certain things and requires upon certain criteria being met. And it's not down to us to spend that money. In some cases it is, if it's allocated to us as an authority to spend, but the majority of that will be other, like the county council. Yeah.
So
I can't answer that, I'm afraid. I can get one of the section 106 team to answer that question.
Can I just have a comment here? Because 106 and SIL are specifically ring-fenced to the developments of where they take place. I have got 2 or 3 or 4 different issues in my own division where SIL and 106, some of it is tied up in a sort of a way that it's only when so many houses are developed and then they can actually afford to. Then I've got 2 or 3 major projects that are waiting to be taken through the SIL. But it is not general fund.
no,
It is specific. It's a specific fund, and therefore the schools that I've got are some. They get funding from 106 and they get funding from government and elsewhere. So for me, I wouldn't want you dishing this money around anywhere. I'd just stick to the projects that it's allocated to and ring fence for.
So thank you, Councillor Adair, for your observation there. Councillor Garland, if you want to come in, then I'll come back on.
Sorry, I appreciate. That's exactly what I meant, really. I haven't got the vocabulary to try and say what I'm saying clearly. But what I'm trying to say is, if I was expecting a new school in my area from the section 106 or SIL money, I wouldn't be very happy to know the money was in the bank and the school wasn't being built. That's what I'm trying to say bluntly.
Just before I bring Councillor Wheeler in, I think Sarah has committed to coming back with a sort of a response on this, but I think what Councillor Adair has already highlighted is my understanding that it is very much tied into the development, and when that happens, when the school is being built and so on. So it is out of our hands, as Sarah has said, I think, to some degree. But I think the point noted, Councillor Gowan, that obviously it's a lot of money, and you know, we do need to spend it eventually, but it can only be spent at the appropriate time when the development has reached a certain stage. Councillor Wheeler, do you want to come in?
On 106, to stick with 106, not going to Sill. I assume we being Western Borough Council, hold the 106 monies, and then there are discussions around the County Council as to how that's spent, particularly on schools, for example, because that's County Council domain. There has been criticism voiced by schools that Rushden Borough Council have historically sat on 106 money and not released it. I'm not agreeing with that criticism. What I'm actually trying to say is we need to get that money released quicker, not get log jammed between the County Council and Rushden Borough Council in spending that money. I do agree with Councillor Gowan to an extent. We need to get the money out, and not put obstacles or hurdles in the way. Sometimes I think the council is very afraid of the developer ask for the money back. We're going to ask for the money back. That's what it was there to be spent on. Don't, get rid of that fear factor. And I think we've got too much of the fear factor with developers saying we want the money back. No, that's the fear factor. I said, yeah.
No, it does.
It can go back. It can go back. But the fear factor is what I'm talking about. You're right. It can go back.
On our processes, or what we can do to possibly improve the process.
Sorry.
Obviously, I'm not an expert and don't work in the Section 106 department, but our processes obviously are policies and procedures are laid out for us, and we do follow those. And there are steps that I know organisations have to go through if they want to bid for or request Section 106 money. As far as I'm aware, we go through the correct process of an application, and we do release the money when it's due. If there aren't applications coming in, then the money sits in an interest-bearing account, and when it's paid back with interest on for the length of time we've been holding it. So it is down to applications coming in for schemes and for builds in relation to those areas that the Section 106 was claimed for in the first place.
So, in fact, the example you gave was, I had exactly this conversation today. I was asking about match day parking around Trent Bridge, and the conversation I had with the county officer went along the line with, well, there is money, but we need to get it from Rushcliffe. And it seems to me that there's, Rushcliffe and the county, I would have thought, should be in lockstep about sorting this problem out around the football ground. And it felt like it was almost like they were talking to Whitehall, not Rushcliffe, who are next door and who surely have a massive vested interest in sorting the problem out. And I'd be quite interested to know just how easy it is. And I'm not suggesting it isn't easy, but I don't know. I mean, certainly it could be people are hiding behind that, oh, well, we need to talk to Rushcliffe's story, or it could be that it's genuinely difficult for them to pull down the money from Rushcliffe. And, if it's getting 2% at the moment, that's not good, is it? Because that's a loss in the medium term, because it's below the interest rates and the rate of inflation. So it feels to me that, something like match day parking, which isn't an infrastructure investment, it could be done now, and it feels that the money should be going out and not sitting in the bank.
Sorry, until such time Forest actually proceed with that.
Yeah, that makes.
Councillor Shaw.
In East Leek, we've just spent £1 million building a new pavilion, of which £500,000 came from Section 106 and Sill. And when we were given the figures, we were surprised how much it was, because it was a lot more than we were expecting because of the accumulated interest. But also, we were submitting claims on the 1st, 2nd of the month to pay the bill on the 14th of the month, and every month it came on time. So the time at Rushcliffe to actually process it was very good, with no complaints whatsoever with that. But on the other hand, you do get stupid situations like when we were building the car park, there was £55,000 earmarked for transport, and we weren't allowed to have that because we were told the car park was nothing to do with transport. So we finished having to borrow that £55,000, whereas it's, as far as I'm aware, it's still sat on the Section 106 money, not spent.
It's all through the planning process. It comes through the planning process. But if
Sarah, I think you wanted to come in, maybe one final point, but I think the general consensus or opinion here seems to be, obviously, we want that money spent and as quickly as possible. And I think we do have to acknowledge it's not necessarily always in Rushcliffe Borough Council's hands. But if there is a way of expediting our processes, I'm sure our offices will look at that further. But clearly it is linked to the development and the developers, and that is what will trigger the releases. So unless there are any final points, I mean, perhaps Sarah, some further clarification to come back to the group in terms of what the actual exact process is, so it reminds us all and gives us assurance, which is what we're looking for as a scrutiny group, to make sure we are doing what we can to ensure that this is the right process.
Thank you.
I could just add, in another part of my areas, there's a lot of houses going up on my county division, and there's a lot of sill money now coming in. And now the communities, the local communities that are now benefiting from that sill money, because we just had an issue the other day in one of the villages, and they got something new, and the sill money paid for it, which they wouldn't normally have had. So I think it's functioning somewhere, and maybe it needs a bit of speeding up, but it is functioning, and the results are coming through.
Sarah, final point from you?
Yeah, just to make a final point, like I say, it is part of the planning process, and in terms of when the funds are requested and that process has been completed, in terms of the planning process, the request is in. There is no delay from a financial perspective in transferring that money over. So the delay, in my opinion, will be from those schemes actually coming in the first place and that being triggered.
Okay.
Watch this space.
Watch this space, yes. Any other points on Sarah's report on any of the areas? Councillor Wheeler.
Commercial property income. I'm using an example of the point and drove by, as I do every day. There seems to be more units now available for rent, which worries me a little bit. I don't want to go necessarily into a lot of detail here. Are we at risk from rental income there because of vacant units? And I use a point example because I drive past it every blowing day and I see it says empty. I wouldn't say empty, it's to let, I think it says, or vacant or whatever it is. Or that big board that's on the side there. Whereas, think back certainly a year back, I think don't think there's only one to let or none. I believe there's at least two, possibly even three to let. I'm just a bit concerned that could impact upon our rental stream.
Sarah, do you want to come and respond?
Yeah, I'm not sure of the number. It was my understanding that there was still only one vacant unit at the point.
It may be that
the
panel has been replaced.
It may be.
I don't know. I'm only going by what I see.
Yeah. In terms of going forward with office rental, I think when COVID first hit, there was a perception that office rentals would probably struggle, but that's not what we're experiencing at the moment. So I think a lot of places have downsized into those smaller office spaces, so there's a bit of a knock on there. But obviously we do keep an eye on it, we do forecast it, our budget monitoring, and we'll raise it as a concern if there are more numbers of units coming up for let. But as of this stage, it's not a concern.
Just an observation.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. From my memory, Sarah, when we had a look at the utilisation of our properties, it was fairly high in general terms. But obviously, I think it's it's something we need to keep an eye on. Having said that, I think our commercial income is at 16.3%, isn't it, at the moment? And we have a ratio or threshold of up to 30%. So I'm assuming, I don't know what the mechanics are behind that, but in terms of the ratio or threshold of 30, going above 30%, that would become a big risk, obviously. So any, Councillor Adair, do you want to come in?
I think we've questioned a lot, but I think we should also be very congratulatory at some of the work that's been done here and with the investments and all the rest of it and encapsulating. I know interest rates are doing this and spiraling here and spiraling there and keeping up to it. And when I look at your budget figure and your internal, where it is, spiking nicely in the right direction.
Thank you, Councillor Adair. I mean, I would agree. I think just before I bring in Councillor Galvin, I think overall the performance is very positive. I think we do highlight on many occasions, and we've done so with Section 106 monies before as well, the commercial income level, commercial income borrowing, and also the fact that actually we don't have a requirement for external borrowing at the moment. So overall, it's actually very positive, I think, which I'm not sure all councils can say the same. Councillor Galvin, did you want to come in?
Sorry, I had one more. So yes, I'd further second that. But can I just ask about the underspend on support to registered housing providers and what that means? Is that due to lack of building? Could you explain what that means, where it's come from, please? Thanks.
Yeah, I think this came up at the last meeting that we had, and the officers are actively looking for schemes to use that funding on.
Okay, and any further points on Sarah's report? I don't see any hands up. Sarah, I've got two very final points, hopefully very brief. But paragraph 4.10 refers to 26 million we have on call accounts, and there's references to a lag in terms of the interest income and so on. So I'm just curious to know what's the net impact of that, of the lagging rates, using your terminology? Do we actually have an assessment of that, or do we wait until it happens?
No, we don't make an assessment of the lag on the interest rates. I think that because we have to hold it in cash, that there isn't really any alternative to us of putting it in a higher earning account, because that would mean committing that money for a longer period, which isn't possible with the cash flow situation that we're in. Okay,
and the final one from me. There are references in paragraph 4.16 in terms of our internal borrowing. We've just said we don't have a requirement for external borrowing, which is very positive, but the internal borrowing references an increase from 5.5 million, which was projected in Q1, to 9.25 million. My question is, what accounts for that increase?
We were originally planning to use some capital receipts to fund our programme for this year, and Holygate Lane, which is one of the receipts we were expecting during 22-23, has actually been delayed into 23-24. So obviously that's pushed up our CFR, because we need to internally borrow even more.
Thank you, Sarah. I did actually notice the Holygate reference. I was wondering if there's anything else as well. But okay, any final points? No. Okay. So thank you, Sarah, for the insight into the mid-year review. I think in summary, the group has been provided assurance we're still on a positive, I think, trajectory. Our investment balances are higher, our interest income is higher for obvious reasons with what's happening in the macroeconomic climate. And I think from an internal perspective, our management of funds and our sort of thresholds and boundaries are still being adhered to in terms of the liability benchmark and also the commercial income and so on. So overall, very, very positive, I think. So thank you for that. And I think congratulations to the team. I think continuing, particularly in light of the economic uncertainty at the moment, with the performance. Okay, so the group is asked to note the capital and investment strategy as an up-to-date position as of the 30th of September, which we have done. So I think that can be minuted. And Sarah, thank you for the insight again. Which brings us on to item number 6 on our agenda, which is the work programme. Sarah, I don't know if you have any comments on this. Obviously, today's meeting, I think, was slightly shortened because of the reasons I explained earlier. Having said that, February is a very long agenda at the moment. Do you want to make any comments on that and what to expect in terms of those items?
Thank you. Yeah, just as you can see, we have moved the statement of accounts and the audit report to this February meeting, which would have ordinarily been at this meeting today. And that's due to a national issue with infrastructure assets as part of the audit. So the auditors are unable to sign off the accounts until a consultation exercise has been completed. So that's the reason for the movement of those 2 items. Also, just to remind the group that there will be some training before the meeting on the statement of accounts that will precede those items.
Thank you, Sarah. So for those of you who will be here in February, it won't be such a short meeting, I don't think. There's quite a lot to cover. Councillor Adair.
This is the last meeting of this council, and this one. Is there another one in April before, or is this the last meeting of this? I'm just wondering if, or is there another?
I think it might be.
Yeah, that's what I said last time.
So we need to tidy it up.
Yes. Okay. I have a couple of final points to raise with the group before we close business today, and those 2 items are: the first is the skills audit. So members of this group, and in fact the all councillors were asked to complete a skills audit, which I know officers have been collating. But for members of this group in particular, we have had some of those back, and I know officers have had a look at those, and we've had some comments back. I made some comments myself. I did think the SITFA requirement and template is incredibly long. Some of it I thought was very repetitive. But what we do need to do is encourage, please, if I may, all group members to complete that. It will be looked at in the context of, I think, after May, when we may have a different composition of this group, and we may well need to do that again for those any new members that are here, or indeed for any of us that are still here who haven't completed it. So I just wanted to highlight that again. I believe from what Sarah mentioned that some of the requirements from SITFA may have changed, or some of the sort of template or formats, whatever. So that's being looked into. So we'll have possibly a refreshed version of that template. So I'm sure you'll keep us up to date on that. The second one is actually something we referred to, and not for discussion today necessarily, but it was just a reminder that the Redmond review, which looked at the appointment of an independent member to this particular committee, is something that will come back, going back to the work programme, possibly after the April or May meeting, and we will come back to that item because I think it may become mandatory in terms of the independent member of this group. So just really bring that to the group's attention. That's the formal items on the agenda today. Is there any other business from any members of the group this evening? If not, I'm pleased to announce that at 7:54 I make